There was a lot of hype around the trademark announcement of Kamen Rider Zero-One way back in 2019. We had known for years that Kamen Rider Geo would be the final installment in the Heisei era of the franchise, but what this new era would hold for Rider was unknown until April 31st, 2019, when we finally got the name for this new era of time in Japan, the Reiwa era. This made the eventual trademark reveal of Kamen Rider Zero-One more exciting than usual, as it was now known that this wasn't just a standard Kamen Rider, oh, here's the next Rider after Geo. No, this was the first Reiwa Rider, Reiwa Rider Zero-One. Oh, would you look at that? A little over a month later, the pre-season teaser post was leaked, but much like Geo the year prior, it made use of a generic rider silhouette that couldn't give us any real information on the look of the rider. However, thanks to Geo utilizing that same blank template, this year not only did we know that this was just a template and not a preformed sort of design, we also knew that this little rectangle down there was gonna be the gimmick for this year, so that was a cool tease for what was to come. It would end up becoming a disadvantage though, because in an unprecedented twist, 2 days later, these images surfaced, which may go down as my favorite thing to ever happen during a rumor mill for a Rider season. Someone out there cooked up an entire fake catalog for Kamen Rider Zero-One, complete with the rectangle gimmick we knew about, and all the drivers, riders, forms, and even an early release Zero-One ride watch. How this whole thing was proven false, I have no idea. Maybe it was just because it was so early, because it seemed pretty legit. Whoever made this really covered their bases. Oh, and there was this picture too that came up at some point, but I don't think anyone trusted anything at this point since, well, there was a whole fake catalog out there. So, what started to gain traction as the true design of Zero-One were rumors that it would look like Agito. Big red eyes, black undersuit, gold coloring. I mean, it's Agito. What else do I have to say? This started to seem true with new drawings surfacing that fit that description, alongside rumors that the season would play into companies and businesses due to a leaked briefcase sword design. When early filming began, obviously no pictures could surface, but it led to more drawings of the three main riders and their symbols, which introduced us to Kamen Rider Vulcan, Valkyrie, and the names of these three riders' forms. This is probably the most we have ever gotten about a season before we got its leaked catalog. Getting decent looks at the main three riders' helmets was pretty unprecedented, and what's more unprecedented is all of that coming true, because not much long after we got our big old catalog scan dump that gave us all the information and pretty much confirmed all those other rumors. Our first looks at the Hiden Zero-One driver, Ames, Shot Riser, and MetaboJunrai.net Force Riser confirmed that the season would incorporate some sort of company warfare in it to an extent, and showed us the different riders, their different forms, and the gimmicks that would unlock them per usual. Unbeknownst at the time though, this would actually be the last toy scans we would ever see for a rider's first quarter, with Bandai moving then to a fully digital format later during Zero-One. The most interesting part of these early catalogs that made the lead up to the eventual cast reveal more interesting was Kamen Rider Valkyrie. With a name and design very clearly feminine in nature, the big speculation was whether or not this would be the earliest female rider to debut in a season, literally being the tertiary rider of the season. Of course, at the press conference, we got the first trailer, which not only revealed the business and technology industry aspect of the show, the different factions, and the characters, but also the cast reveal that gave us the confirmation of Valkyrie as a female rider and everything else we saw in the scans as well. And after that, there was nothing else very exciting in the prehistory of Zero-One, just anticipation for the first episode of the first Reiwa Rider. Usually in these reviews, I talk about the season overall with each of the different characters and plots, but today I'm actually going to be doing something a little different and looking at the individual story arcs in the season, because that's kind of how my thoughts on the season end up. Let's start with the first arc against MetaboJunrai, which to no one's surprise is my favorite arc and I think the best one in the season. It pretty much excels in every aspect of the story. Let's start with the plot, since I'm more of a plot guy, and the plot of the first arc is fantastic. The world building is amazingly unique for Rider, with the story of the human gears and heat and intelligence, with this intriguing backstory behind their creation and Daybreak Town. It is a really captivating setup that beautifully evolves throughout these episodes, that combines fascinating, fast-paced storytelling and a slow burn style of storytelling. For example, the first few episodes are filled with plot developments. Episode 2 reveals Metsubo Junai to the world, Episode 3 reveals the background plot with Yua, Episode 4 gives more background, etc. But then there are stories that have a slow build up to come into full effect for the arc later on, or just in a completely different arc. The big one is obviously Yaiba and Guy, but there's also developments with the villains over time. For example, we get early looks at Hirobi, teases of Jin becoming a rider, and my favorite is actually Dodo in Little Assassin, building up power before creating his own mini faction, and then playing right into the final episodes of the story arc, with his powers finally manifesting into a full-on rider and giving Metsubo Junai the tools to launch their biggest attack. It's such a cool bit of background storytelling that I really love, and the result is a plot that grabs your attention each week with new and exciting reveals, and holds your attention with story elements in the background that need to be properly built up, which it does. In addition, there's also a fantastic set of characters that play into this plot in an excellent way. To me, Aruto is a very subtle reference to the first Heisei rider, Godai. In order to attain the full powers of Zero-One, Aruto must go on a small arc in the beginning of the show, expanding his ideals and hardening his resolve to protect Hidden Intelligence and its human gears. And then, over the course of the next few episodes, he grows into his role as a CEO until seemingly accomplishing his goal of a peaceful human gear human world. It's a fantastic story for him, and I think it was really done well here. Then you move into his interactions with the other characters, and just straight up these other characters, and things begin to get even more interesting. The main relationship everyone knows and talks about is Aruto and Izu, and I think it's just fantastic. You've got a failed comedian with an affinity for puns and a robot who takes everything literally, and the result is shenanigans and just a lot of fun. However, Izu even plays into the story a bit when she's temporarily shut down by Jin, and it hardens Aruto's resolve and beliefs, which gets tied up with another amazing interaction that really shows what human gears can truly be in the world and gives a small taste of what's to come in the season. While Aruto and Izu are pretty much on the same path character-wise, of course there's a parallel to them in Fua. I know his name is Isamu, but pretty much everyone calls him Fua, and that's what I call him, so I'm sticking to that. And I'm calling Yua Yaiba here, just kind of to keep that through line, but I actually usually call her Yua. While Aruto is built up in the story as the human liaison of the human gears, Fua is built up as pretty much their antagonist. Of course, he's not the story antagonist since he's still a hero in it, but he's definitely a wall in Aruto's goal for a human gear world. And seeing both characters slowly overcome their differences and quite literally joining their powers in the finale of the arc is super cool. Fua's development is one of my favorite parts of the beginning because it felt so natural. Yeah, he hates human gears for a good reason, but when one saves his life and he gets to truly see how useful they can be, of course he'd start to accept them more, but obviously not completely given his past. While Fua is probably my second favorite character in the first arc, my real favorite part is Yaiba, and that's not because she's the first female rider or because she's super smart and badass. No, it's because she's so interesting in the beginning. She's set up as this really mysterious character with an ambiguous hatred for Hidden Intelligence, and I really loved seeing how she manipulated all the other characters to gain data on the human gear opposition, slowly undo some things set up by the other characters, and come closer to her own personal goal. It gave me massive Kuroto Dan vibes in the early X8 episodes, and maybe that's just why I like it so much, but I think she was just really damn cool. She was also just amazing alongside Fua. Fua as this goofy and brash captain of Ames, juxtaposed with Yaiba's no-nonsense attitude and straightforwardness, made for a lot of fun interactions. it further creates that parallel with Aruto and Izu in the split between aims and hidden intelligence. Yes, there's Metsubojinrai, but I'll talk about them later, because this first arc really feels more like a focus on aims and hidden. Aruto and Izu are working together to create a world human gears can live in, while Fuwa and Yaiba are working parallel to similarly defeat Metsubojinrai, but don't share that same passion for the human gears until they all join forces in the finale of this arc and move past their differences to defeat the common enemy thanks to human gear ingenuity. It was a fantastic wrap up for this arc and beautifully set the stage for the future, since, well, this isn't actually the end of the show, even if it's structured a lot like it is, since there's 30 episodes left. And then that's where I think Zero-One really starts to fall apart and become 0.5. Wow. On paper, I think that the second part of Zero-One is actually much more interesting than the first half. With Metsubojinrai dismantled, Aruto must now expand his role as the CEO of Hidden Intelligence as a rival company attempts to dismantle all that he has fought to protect, while his greatest foe slowly infects the human gears to rebuild itself from destruction. That's a great evolution of the ideas that came before, but it really falls flat. First of all, from a plot perspective, nothing happens all that often. The plot is at a standstill for multiple episodes on end, since the arc, not the villain, is focused on the corporate battles between Aruto and Guy Amatsu, and those corporate battles are boring. They all follow the same basic structure of Guy explains the next part of the battle. Aruto meets the quirky human gear that will help him. The human gear gets turned into Magia during the battle. Thouser jacks the power and destroys the human gear. The human gear comes back next episode. The Raider is defeated. The end. Yes, I know Rider commonly follows a pattern, but like here, right down to the damn music used, everything is the same. These new episodes don't really add anything. We already know about human gears and how they fit into the world thanks to the earlier episodes, so this just feels like a retread. There is some build up to the creation of the purified metal cluster hopper, and that works well, but not only is that story a total derailing of the course charted out for this arc, it also gets completely undermined by focusing on more human gears for the episodes after it. Why would you make a form powered by Aruto's interactions with the previous human gears of the show, only to undermine it by introducing more human gears he has yet to interact with? From a plot perspective, this arc doesn't really work, not only compared to its predecessor, but just because it meanders over and over and doesn't do much at all to create an interesting story. I know the big argument is it's because it chooses to focus more on character rather than story, but this arc completely pulls apart the characters in the worst way possible, and that is because of one man, Guy Amatsu. Much like this arc itself, I think the idea of Guy is really interesting in this season as a perfect inverse of Aruto, as a corrupt businessman who sees human gears and humans alike as tools and puts a company's reputation ahead of the people who make it up. In addition, Thouser is seemingly designed as another kind of villain you are meant to hate with every fiber of your being. However, to make Thouser an iconic villain to hate, it ends up undoing so much of what was done with all the other characters in the earlier episodes and make them seem more stupid than they actually are. The first few episodes of the show establish that Aruto has no problem destroying human gears that have gone rogue, which I felt was such an interesting development because it shows that despite having an affinity for all human gears, he's able to separate them from the hacked Magia and make the hard choices to destroy them. Yet here, Aruto is always distracted by the Magia, trying to reason with them for the sake of allowing Thouser to jack his powers and demonstrate how much of an asshole he is. Aruto just ends up seeming stupider. Fuwa is not totally ruined because he has some cool stories, but they're mostly relegated to the background for the sake of showing off how much of an asshole Thouser is, when these ideas should be at the forefront since they literally deal with the main villains. And the part I absolutely cannot get over, Yaiba. How do you crash and burn a character this hard? All of this setup with Yaiba as a character willing to do whatever it takes to achieve her goals, even manipulate her closest allies, but still have amazing chemistry with them, just goes completely out the window. In hindsight, with what we learn later on, it's because of mind control from Guy, but like, then don't have her do all the manipulation and have Guy do it instead? Or at least, like, in this part of the show, give her some personality other than To make matters worse, there is some sort of line with Yaiba about not trusting the world, most likely why she's so loyal to Zaya, but then like, do something with that? The fact that anything interesting about Yaiba as a character is gone for so long isn't completely what pisses me off, but it's just that there's nothing interesting to replace it. Remember how Yaiba created the Shot Riser system? Nope, now she's holding up signs. Remember how she led an entire team of people into a war zone against evil artificial artificial intelligence? No, now she's turning that same artificial intelligence into the weapons she fought against. Remember how she had this mysterious hatred against Hiden? Well, yes, but that's a line. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, at least we still got a good villain in Guy, personality-wise, because I hate everything else about Guy. In retrospect, his overall impact on this story makes no sense. At the end of the arc, we learn Guy has been controlling Naki and Fuwa's mind since his appearance for the purpose of distributing raid risers. Why does he do this? In Guy's second big appearance in an episode, he tells his Zaya Spec competitor that he won't allow cheating in the competition. And that's cool, it gives Guy a code of honor that makes him an interesting character. But then we're led to believe hours later he uses a puppet to provide that same person he criticized for cheating with a literal weapon to attack the people at the competition. And he continues to do this for the next few episodes. We're given no reason why Guy is just providing his representatives with raid risers that are constantly used to attack others. It can't be a marketing ploy because they keep attacking people with them. Why would people buy weapons used on literal rampaging monsters? I guess it's to cheat, because clearly that's a line the writers decided to throw in and then completely forget about. We see that in broad daylight in front of our heroes, Guy just uses Zetsuma risers on human gears, which, keep in mind, was the same act Aruto used to oust Metsubo Jinrai as a terrorist organization. And as we see later in the show, there's clearly no quarrel with doing this to out Guy as a villain, so why don't you do this now? Why is he doing this now if it was established he doesn't like cheating? It was even established Humagears can go berserk without belts. Why are you using them? Imagine how much more interesting the show would have been if instead of using Zetsume risers on Humagears, Guy took advantage of their new connection to the arc and just used lies and manipulation to make them turn on their own, further shattering Hiden Intelligence's image, but having no way to link it back to him since he's just talking to them. Acting wise and as an antagonist to the other characters, Guy is pretty cool, but everything else about his character and the way it quite honestly ruins a lot of the story is really disappointing and pretty much sours the rest of this already very mediocre arc. I know that from here until the finale, there's technically two separate arcs in the story, but they feel more like one story relative to each other than all the others do, so I'm just looking at it as the one final story for Zero-One. And I really like this one. I don't think it was as good as the first arc, but I don't think it was as boring as the second arc. And overall, it was a fun time, a great evolution of the show's themes, and a fantastic ending to the season. I think this is the best arc for Aruto. He was more or less thrown into becoming Zero-One and the biggest advocate for the Humagears as the CEO of Hiden, so it was really inspiring to see him move past how much of a failure he was shown to be with that job and decide to start over on his own terms to move forward with the dream he has learned to love. Hiden manufacturing doesn't really change much story-wise because it's kind of the same things happening with new locations and characters, but I appreciate that this is happening on Aruto's own terms, and it's a great piece of development for him. It also lends itself greatly to the idea of helping Humagears reach their singularity instead of it happening by accident, and really playing into the show's themes of Humagears as actual people in the world. The way it ultimately plays into the final form with Izu is absolutely amazing, with a Humagear really surpassing singularity and becoming really the closest thing possible to a human without actually being one. And then we get to see the flip side of that in the finale, with how singularity can function as a source of malice for both Humagears and humans. The way the show totally reinvents its villains is one of the coolest parts of the season, in my opinion. For most of the show, Metsubo Jinrai is just alright. I don't think they're terrible. I just don't think there was really a lot about them that made me love them other than Jin. He obviously had the most personality out of anyone, and I really like that his revival contributed to his development by expanding upon the idea of him sort of beginning to change his views on the terrorist movement before he was hacked by the Ark and basically just became a slave to that kind of programming. And then when he's revived, it turns him into more of an anti-hero since now he has his own viewpoints and he's not affected by any outside sources. Other than Williamson, of course, who I wish he had more interactions with Williamson, and I also wish that Williamson did more because he essentially created the next generation of human gears and the coolest suit in the season. I don't know, that was a weird mystery. At least it got explained, and just for that, I'm kind of okay with it. Jin's new viewpoints also connect to the rest of Metsubojinrai, and they're really natural redemptions, despite all of them being artificial robots. When Arc Zero is introduced, he's clearly designed as that standard Rider final boss that was there the whole time in the background, pulling the strings, causing everything to go his way. But then the show completely inverts that idea by really showing the Arc painted as this true villain compared to the other villains in the show, where the Arc is stealing singularity, which is what the human gears want. They want to be people, essentially, and that is the goal of Metsubojinrai, of Hirobi, and that is what makes Metsubojinrai unique compared to the Arc, and of course that causes them all to turn against him and destroy him. But here, I think it makes a lot of sense. It makes sense they turn against this villain. And then of course we see how that backfires then with the creation of Arc 1 by taking a look at how similar humans and human gears are once again, with now looking at their response to loss and to destructive malice. And I love how the Arc lives on now as like a background entity, once again pulling the strings, but in like an extremely indirect way, and it makes him really unique in the broad scheme of things. I love how the last few episodes turn everything on its head in a unique way, and it's just an overall fantastic ending to the show by turning basically our final battle into a battle of two anti-heroes. You understand where both Aruto and Hirobi are coming from now, because they've suffered so much and both have done very questionable things and very righteous things, and it creates this really interesting dynamic for the final battle of the season that we really haven't seen since Gaim, and you know what everyone says about Gaim, so beyond that, there's not really much I have to say about this arc other than just some weird minor choices to me. The redemption of Thouser is something that seemed pretty obvious because he's not the final Rider villain and this is Kamen Rider, but I think the writers could have tried to put a bit more effort into redeeming him. In one episode and literally a few hours in universe, Guy decides to stop trying to attack literally everyone because he remembered a cute dog he had when his dad demanded he somehow gets 1,000% on a test. Okay then. Ignoring the literal crimes against humanity that are just kind of thrown in, I'm not entirely opposed to the idea of redeeming Thouser, especially given that the other characters' reactions to it are awesome and realistic, and there are some pretty good seeds laid for redeeming him. Since he gets his ass kicked every episode before that, have a line or two where he starts to question his actions since he's always losing. And since Zero-Two uses the same authorized functionality as Thouser, have him play a small role in that as well. As of now, Guy's changing of heart just feels really rushed. Another weird part is Fua. Retconning Fua's tragic backstory is really stupid, plain and simple. His story is clearly learning to move past his hatred of human gears after they've saved his life and realize there's not really that much wrong with them, and to just say, oh yeah, that was fake, kind of feels like a slap in the face. It means his development literally didn't matter. It makes it feel like we've wasted our time with him. He's still a fun character, but I feel like the stuff that made him interesting is all gone. Thankfully though, Fua is reunited with Yaiba, and the two once again bring back those absolutely amazing interactions. I really love seeing Yaiba finally break free from Zaya, turn into resignation, and finally have some agency as a person, trying a different approach to bringing down the arc in Metsubojinrai, unique to her character and personality. I still think at the end of the day, there was a lot with Yaiba the show could have utilized more regarding her character, especially with the setups they made, but at the end of it all, I'm glad that they finally did something with her. And that kind of sums up my overall thoughts with the season of Kamen Rider Zero-One. There were a lot of cool ideas in this season. A CEO main rider, a company versus company battle, a villain organization with similar ideals to the main hero, multiple factions with parallel thinking, and more than that I'm probably forgetting, all performed by vastly different characters that all had different, unique, and interesting personalities, but sadly it didn't seem like enough care was put into those different facets of the season, and so as a result we get something that ends up kind of meh. I think there are a lot of low points in Zero-One and a lot of missed opportunities, but it has such a strong beginning and a pretty solid final leap that my overall thoughts on it lean more positive than negative. Looking at Zero-One as the final season of the Reiwa era, I think it's a pretty strong start, and hopefully Aruto will come back in future crossovers as this era's first rider, and because he's just a great character and probably my favorite thing to come out of this season overall. With my ranking of rider seasons, I would place Kamen Rider Zero-One just above double. As terrible as I think the middle chunk of this season is, everything surrounding it is so much more interesting, so much more diverse in my opinion, that I personally think it deserves to be a bit higher than the really simple formula Double sometimes finds itself falling into. Of course, be sure to let me know what you personally thought of this season down in the comment section, since I'd love to hear other takes on the stories of this season. You can let me know what you thought of the aesthetics too, but I'm personally going to be talking about that and more in my upcoming episode of Rider Potential, where I'll look at the potential for the season getting an adaptation outside of Japan. If you want to stay tuned for that, my upcoming review on Kamen Rider Saber, or more Kamen Rider content in general, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I hope to see you next time. Thank you for watching.